I want to turn it over to Harry Haney, the director of the Supply Chain and Sustainability Summit. And I'm sure you can enjoy the next few hours of the summit. Harry, take it away.
Thanks, John, and good morning, everyone. Our next session is brought to you by Redwood Logistics, and we're going to watch a short video from Redwood, and then we'll go from there. All right. Well, okay. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Mike Flynn and welcome him this morning. Mike is the Senior Vice President of Sales from Redwood Logistics. Mike, please take it away.
Thanks, Harry. Good morning, everybody. As most of y'all know, Redwood Logistics is headquartered in Chicago, and we've enjoyed a long-standing relationship with Loyola University and the Supply Chain and Sustainability Center. Together with Loyola, we have conducted multiple research initiatives as well as orchestrated student competitions. Most recently, a data competition called Data Connect 2020 that culminated in a great virtual finale during the COVID lockdown. Additionally, we have historically recruited and hired Loyola students for both internships and full-time positions at Redwood. And of course, several of our members have enjoyed speaking in the classrooms and at many Loyola events, which brings us to today. For those of you not familiar with Redwood, we are a leading logistics provider that has provided integrated solutions for more than 18 years. Our diverse portfolio includes digital freight brokerage, flexible freight management, and an innovative platform service that simplifies the integration of disparate supply chain technologies. At Redwood, we like to say we help connect our customers to the power of supply chain management, technology, and the industry's brightest minds. For more information, we invite you to our website at www.redwoodlogistics.com. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our next session. We have a great panel lined up today. We're going to talk about preparing for the next shock, which is very relevant to the supply chain industry and what I've been doing and everybody on the phone has been doing year to date. So great panel. Our moderator will be Amy Patel, Senior Vice President and U.S. Regional Sales Manager for BMO Financial Group. So with that, Amy, I will turn it over to you.
Mike, thank you. I don't know if you guys could hear me.
Can.
Okay, perfect. Mike, thank you and Redwood for being the sponsor of this panel discussion. As we start the session, I would like to start with this. There have been a multitude of shocks and downturns seen in the past decade or so, including the vortex, the oil fluctuation, and recently the geopolitical issues at its brink leading into 2020. And now, for the last 6 months, the pandemic. That said, this pandemic has had many different shifts as we pivoted multifold in pursuit of finding the new normal and meet the demands of supplies and timely sourcing. Our panelists today will be bringing to the Loyola Supply Chain Center for a robust conversation around preparation, staying power, and agility. The theme of this session, and a good one, is preparing for the next shock. While every shock is not created equal, what can be said about what you've learned from the most in this current unprecedented pandemic? And I will open it up to all of the panelists on this session today. Daniela Hendricks, Edward Klinger, and Edward Tymick. I'm going to go with Edward Klinger. I'm going to call you Ed, and Edward Tymick, I'll call you Edward, just to keep it to keep it separated. I can share in that pain because my first name is Amy. So I will start with any of you. Please chime in.
Well, maybe I can just speak. Thank you, Amy. I wanted to say for us at Gebrüder Weiss, we've definitely come to value the planning ahead of time and having our workforce mobile long before the pandemic actually started. What we definitely had to do now is actually build trust in an at-home work situation and allowing our staff the flexibility to work from home and still do their daily job function uninterrupted. And that definitely brought a light on the value and the importance of paperless processes. So what we've actually done at Gebrüder Weiss, we've actually became paperless in the US back in 2012 already, both in our operations and customs brokerage departments. Now, back in 2012, it was a little bit unheard of in our industry. Our industry being freight forwarding and logistics is a very paper-driven industry, and especially when it comes to US customs regulations, US customs is very paper-driven still to date. So back in 2012, that was very unheard of. So we were kind of one of the front leaders in this in our industry to go this route. And with it, it actually drastically helped us increase our productivity and efficiency in both our departments. So what we have done to get to that stage was, you know, we looked at our processes and said, how can we make our staff comfortable having a file rack sitting next to the computer, putting this into an electronic version and still make them feel like they won't miss anything and continue handling their daily tasks without interruption. So we looked at our IT system and we created a dashboard for all our operational staff that mirrored pretty much the file rack that sat next to their computer. And we used workflow tasks for that. We used milestones for that. And we used color schemes for that. So I have to say, since we rolled this out in 2012, we actually had not one major issue in missing any important files or shipments or any customer service issues. So that's been very positive for us, and it's actually made our staff very comfortable to handle files in a paperless environment. Now, the biggest challenge with that was actually a little bit unexpected, the mental adjustment of this and the mental mindset change of this to actually go from having something in your hand every day and looking at it and now to look at it in an electronic version. So that was definitely the biggest mindset change. And the gap in generations, we could not forget that, you know, people that come from different generations have different knowledge of IT systems and technology and are more comfortable in certain aspects, but also learn differently. So we definitely had to look at our staff and say, how can we make each of them comfortable? And maybe some of them might take a little bit longer. Some of them might need it to have a piece of paper on hand still as we moved along until they were comfortable with just being completely paperless. So once we rolled this out successfully, we then actually invested in triple screens for all our staff, allowing Outlook on one screen, allowing our operational system on the other screen, and then the third screen, having documents open, having the Internet Explorer open, and that again really drastically increased our efficiencies. Now, another thing that helped us with that was it kind of made our staff geographically independent, and we have offices all around the US, and it didn't matter if an operator sat in Chicago, he still could handle and help our staff in LA if that was necessary, and our customers would not even feel any impact of that. So this was definitely what we're doing ahead of time, which has helped us drastically now through this pandemic. But then we also, of course, looked at what can we do, not just to help our staff, but also help our clients now along the way during this pandemic, and what new products and services do we need to look at. So as a worldwide organization, we actually recently just opened new facilities in Germany, in South Korea, in Australia, and New Zealand to help our customer with their supply chain needs. And then locally in the US, we actually hired an import compliance specialist and started a consultancy department, especially right now with a lot of tariff changes on the import customs side. We felt that there was a big need for our clients to really, get help where they can't maybe have the resources to do that themselves. Another thing we looked into was, the stop really in supply chain and shipping and how it really affected inventory for our customers. And we therefore actually invested in a new warehouse facility in the Inland Empire out on the West Coast, and have really started reaching out to our clients, help them with their bringing inventory to the US and distributing from here locally. We understand that not all customers have the means to have their warehouse locations at warehouse location themselves. So those two steps we have done in the US to look and see how can we help clients. And as this pandemic goes on, we definitely will continue to look into new services and products that help not only our staff, but also our clients.
Thanks, Daniela. Very appreciative of all that, the in-depth of how you guys have started prior to pandemic, and how that kind of helped you position yourself through pandemic. So very, very thoughtful, very, very key for this session. Edward?
This is Edward. I'll jump in and maybe approach this from a slightly different perspective. But first, I wanted to thank Loyola and to John for the opportunity to participate in this event. I've had a long association with the organization, and it's provided a lot of value for our company as well as for me personally. So I really appreciate the ongoing relationship. For the folks that are attending today who don't know about Ciena, so we're a telecom infrastructure company. So we provide the backbone of the network for most of the global wireline and wireless carriers. And it's really what allows you to transmit voice data and video, and also through the cloud with some of our GCN partners, people like Microsoft, Google, and so forth. So we have a very heavy or significant manufacturing element to our supply chain, and we've had to deal with a number of disruptions in the past. So we've had a long time focus on our business continuity planning or resiliency planning, but that doesn't mean that we're sitting still. We're definitely using this pandemic as a lessons learned opportunity, testing the robustness of our plans and really making sure that we're ready to continue to deal with this, but also for the next one, because really it's not a matter of if, it's really a matter of when from our perspective. And one of the things that we're very, cognizant of is the plan can't be one-dimensional. There are so many different things that can potentially disrupt your supply chain. It can be a pandemic, it can be a geopolitical event, meteorological, or many other things potentially. So you need to make sure you're considering those different things and how they can impact your ability to supply the product that your customers need. For us also too, we've been very fortunate because executive support is so critical to your resiliency planning. As we've seen, there's investment typically involved. So whether you're investing in safety stock inventory, equipment to allow multiple or redundant manufacturing, or even technology to help provide visibility into your supply chain, you're going to need that executive support. And we've been very fortunate there because our executive team understands the criticality of the supply chain to the overall success of the company. Another thing for us is visibility. So, we've taken a lot of time and developed a number of processes and invested in some technology that allows us to see deep into our supply chain. So having that visibility and understanding what your supply chain looks at multiple tiers, going deep, understanding where the risks and the disruptions can potentially occur and how that ripples through the supply chain. We are very heavy on data. We use data to drive our decisions. So we can map our supply chain, understand if there's a component shortage in one region of the world, what does that mean for our global capability? And part of the success also too is that we make a point of utilizing tier one type partners in our manufacturing environment. So these are not small, companies that tend to be maybe less willing to invest in solutions and partnerships. And we actually, as part of our overall BCP planning, we leverage our partners' own plans and investments as sort of the cornerstone or foundation of our plans. The other thing too is that we've learned is that you have to continuously monitor those partners. You can't wait for a crisis to go in and understand what is their capability, what is their stability, what is their financial standing. So we're checking and monitoring those things all the time. The other thing too for us within the supply chain at Ciena is we've also understood the value of partnerships within the company. So we've partnered with finance on a number of issues where when we've seen potential weaknesses within our supply chain, partner with them to invest in our partners, whether it's early payments, potentially even short-term loans or other type of things where we're able to help prop up and ensure that those partners stay viable for us so we can continue to build the product that we need for our customers. And then also too, one of the things that was really interesting, and this is somewhat I think unique to our industry and maybe medical and others, a few others, is where we've partnered with our legal department to draft the appropriate documentation to prove out that the product that we make is essential infrastructure, and that's allowed us to continue to produce product when many other times other industries have been shut down, automotive being a good example. So understanding those relationships, leveraging those relationships has been critical for us as well. And then lastly, the other thing too is that we really have seen the value of testing and reviewing the plan regularly, making sure that as our manufacturing needs change, our customers' needs change, and we maybe shift our supply chain map around a bit, that we go back and check and make sure is that robustness and that resiliency still there.
Thank you, Edward. Very, very key and critical points, especially as we learned in pandemic how necessary the technology function was important. And clearly you guys have been doing that, and thank you for sharing that. Now we'll go to Ed Klinger.
Thank you. Hear me, Amy, you can hear me okay?
I can, yes, thank
Perfect.
you.
Following on what has already Daniela and Ed have already said before, I'll follow up with capital. Okay, so it's not only to having the people to do the work, to the companies to help you to do the work, which would be like on Daniela's side, Ed on the infrastructure side, et cetera. You got to have capital available to you, and capital and liquidity get you through times like we've been going through the last 7 months. So while we can't say specifically what we've been experiencing because we're a bank, but we can tell you what our clients have been experiencing in terms of the shock to their system from a sourcing standpoint, whether it's domestic or whether it's foreign as well. So I work with Amy at the bank on the lending side, the commercial banking side. We see companies that are in all different industries, manufacturers, distribution, whether it's food, consumer products, building products, general industrials like auto and the like, as well as metals. Okay, so they're sourcing and producing domestically. They're sourcing and producing internationally as well too. And these are not big, huge global public companies. These are family-owned businesses located in and around the Chicagoland area or the Midwest. They're not billion-dollar companies. These are, first, second, third generation family-owned businesses, but they follow their clients, and they've got an operation in the Netherlands or in the UK or in the Far East or Mexico or China, something like that. So they're very sophisticated companies, even though they're family-owned businesses. And so what we've seen them do, the first shock to the system was obviously last fall, and that was anyone bringing in from the Far East. You had the buildup prior to Chinese New Year, and then the second thing you saw was then the pandemic hitting China, and so the two of them stopped their supply, but it wasn't as bad because they had done their buildup and their inventory buildup in advance of Chinese New Year and things shutting down in January, February. What hit them was March, April, when that next series of shipments couldn't be produced. So they're scrambling and they're trying to fulfill their orders from their customers. They scrambled hard. They tried to diversify their supplier base, whether it's by additional suppliers, different countries, different companies, so another, there are one or two suppliers in China they work with. Okay, now they're trying to go to Malaysia or Vietnam, or they're trying to go to Mexico as opposed to China. They're trying to go to onshoring in the US as opposed to bringing it in from Mexico. Great ideas, but they all take time. You can't just do this in 30 days. And so the seeds that they planted during that time frame will help them going forward to diversify their supplier base, to diversify their geographies as well too. So what got them through this was capital. The people that had access to capital could pay up because the ones that could produce it were charging up higher, obviously, right? Because of supply and demand. So how did these companies raise capital or make sure they had additional capital? Part of it was just good working capital management. They put an intense focus on inventory management and on their working capital collection. So they did a better match between orders and commitments. So meaning like they weren't just taking the estimate from the customer, well, we think we'll have this many purchases from you over this amount of time. They really honed down, so they weren't buying too much and paying too much. They tried to match that with delivery schedules, with volumes they could get from their vendor, pricing they'd have to pay for the new vendor. So they did a better match in terms of ins and outs on the orders and the AP. And they really worked hard reducing their slow moving and excess inventory. They went through the corners of the warehouse and started just getting rid of stuff, and then they took that and they refocused that same amount of money into buying more higher volume goods, building up the safety stock, like Ed said before, so that they could meet the order volumes from their clients, as well as having the capital available to them to meet order requests from new clients to pick off new business. So they really focused hard on inventory management. And the final thing was they also held their clients to a more strict standard in terms of payments, payment days, cancellation of orders on short notice, charging for that, charging for expedited shipments, increasing the pricing on slow moving goods when they made an order on it. They tried to get some more discipline in their customer base so that they weren't just viewed as a commodity, that they were actually supplying, value added goods that are not considered a commodity. The final thing that they did was they also, in kind of conjunction to inventory management, was they really focused on AR and AP. Okay, so most of the big box retailers have these companies on some level of a discounting program. So you can, you sell into Walmart, you sell into whomever, you can take that accounts receivable, they have a program, and you'll get paid in 10 days or 15 days at whatever level of discount you have, okay? So the volume of that increased dramatically. Industrials, you don't see it as much. You don't see it like out of the big three auto and the like, but you see it a lot when they're selling into big box retail. So that was a source of cash for them. While they got paid faster, it was only, they took a 5% haircut or whatever it was, but they got paid faster. And that was better than waiting the normal 90+ days to, get payment out of whomever their client was, Walmart and the like. I'll use that as an example. They really focused a lot on volume and prompt pay discounts. They started offering them more frequently. So again, getting cash in earlier, so they're accelerating their AR. Then they went back on their AP and they did the same thing to their AP. If I pay you earlier on the AP, can I get a discount to my vendors? Can I give you a letter of credit, or can I give you a down payment on my order to ensure that my goods come in on time? So they got creative in terms of the acceleration of the AR and how they did their AP. They also went back to some key vendors and said, look, some things are going on. Can I get an extra 10 or 15, maybe 30 days? I'll pay a little extra for it, but just to get the volume. So those are the three things we saw our clients doing immediately in, December, January, February, March, when everything was kind of hitting the fan, which was diversifying supplier base, both geography and company-wise, focusing on inventory management and focusing on their AR and their AP to try to speed that up. Going forward, they're also looking at how to implement those things permanently with their clients and with their vendors, and we'll see how it plays out. But that's what we see from the banking side, what our clients are doing when they see a shock to the system. It's a rush to capital, and where can I get sources of capital from to ensure my flow of goods to my clients?
Ed, thank you very much. What I Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. You guys bring a very strategic, but yet very specific to what is necessary in supply chain and its elements of making sure that all parts are maintained and thought of. So I really appreciate all three of you, everything that you guys brought to this session. Before I move on, I would like to say that there is a Q&A button at the top of your Zoom screen. Please, for the attendees, sorry, I think my video, is my video on, Harry?
Yes.
Okay. Please use the Q&A. We do have a couple of questions, and then we have some that were also given to us prior to the session as well. So we'll just kind of go through them as as the session goes on to keep it fluid. We have one from Jose Luis Betrones. Hope I said that correctly. Do any of the panelists have lessons learned from their risk management and contingency plans and stress testing their supply chain before, during, and after the crisis? Who would like to go with that?
Good question.
Edward, I know you talked a little bit about, finding supplier weaknesses, using the technology and the data inputs that you guys currently have to monitor such things. Can you maybe delve into that a little bit more for Jose?
Sure. I think one specific example for us, and it goes back to what I touched on a little bit about going deeper into the supply chain and going a couple tiers down, which is, you have those relationships with your first level partners and things appear to be running smoothly, but really understanding what's going on below the surface. And what we did find were, we would have in Asia, as one example, strong long-term relationships with a component supplier. And then all of a sudden we would have a decommit from them, and we would find out it's because within their network, they've utilized smaller mom and pop type shops. And so what we really learned, and this really came up year and a half, 2 years ago when we were going through some electronic component issues, and then now again with the pandemic, but really understanding that you have to dig deeper and understand what those partners are doing and what they're capable of, forging through when there's a pandemic or other situation, other disruption, and making sure that those first level tier one partners are building robustness into their supply chain, because it quickly comes back to you and impacts your ability to supply. So what we're doing is even before the pandemic struck is digging deeper, going with our tier ones, having them map out their supply chain, name those sub-component suppliers, so we can understand where we can improve the overall robustness of our supply chain by helping them pick better partners.
Thank you for that. Daniela, I don't know if you have something very quick that you can chime in on that particular question.
One thing that's related to our industry, I would say, is one of the trade programs that U.S. Customs offers is the CTPAT program, which is the Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism. And that program actually not just focuses, on the terrorism side, but also how is your supply chain set up. And it really asks you to look into your companies that you're sourcing from, your overseas manufacturing companies, how they are set up and what they're doing for you. So if companies here in the US are not set up for that, that might be a good opportunity for them to look into it. It's free, it just requires processes to be set up, but it definitely helps guide companies here in the US how they can evaluate their suppliers overseas.
Thank you, Daniela. Appreciate that. Jose, I hope that helps you. If you have more questions, please let us know. I have another question from Vince Polistrini. Question for Ed Tymick. What data points or metrics do you focus on to better manage Ciena's supply chain?
So I was just in the process of typing a reply to Vince. Vince and I are old work colleagues. But
Well, maybe
yeah,
everybody else can hear it too, which is
yeah, absolutely.
which would
I'll
be
stop.
good for the audience. Yeah.
I'll stop typing and share. Yeah. So, we use the standard suite of KPIs that you would expect in terms of, we're looking at our on-time delivery, our performance to stated lead time. But we've also augmented those metrics to understand, again, what we can do within times of constraint or disruption. So we have an agility program, and we use a capital A because it is a formal program where we have stated capabilities that we've built in our supply chain to handle upsides in demand, be it forecasted or unforecasted. So we have a whole standard suite of agility metrics that we include. We also look at our downside flexibility. So we want to be sure that we're not just using inventory as a crutch. So what we want to do is look at both our upside capability, but also our downside capability and what we're able to do to positively impact our inventory and our inventory turns. So I don't know if we're doing anything, I'll say, extremely creative or different from a KPI perspective, but we do definitely utilize those, and we have from an executive level dashboard on down to tier 2, tier 3 metrics that are monitored, and I think this is key actioned on a regular basis.
Thank you for that. We have another question from Tony Thomas. This is a robust session, Harry, which is really great that we're getting all these questions from our audience, and please keep them coming. On the technology front, we've heard about the promise of blockchain-based systems and value add throughout the chain, but it seems like it is still work in progress years later. Do you see blockchain-based systems and deployments being accelerated during the pandemic, and has there been real on the ground value add versus traditional digitalization models? That's a long question, so if you need me to break that down. Who feels comfortable on this panel to talk about blockchain-based systems, and where blockchain systems, where it has been and what it has done during pandemic? Has it been accelerated?
I don't know if I can speak so much about the blockchain system, but I would say that, like I mentioned earlier, that our industry was still very paper driven before the pandemic. So I think for us, I feel like we're still far away from a blockchain type of movement. I think, again, our carriers, our local vendors and truckers, they're slowly getting on the bandwagon of being paperless maybe, and analyzing their systems, and maybe using outside sources to help them, get to that stage. But from my perspective, it's going to be a while until we are at a blockchain scenario, I have to admit. So.
Thank you for that, Daniela.
I think we're in a similar situation as well. In fact, we had, as recently as yesterday, a meeting around the overall digitalization of our supply chain, and we've noted that within the different functional pillars within supply chain, we're doing one-off projects moving towards that, but we don't have, I'll say, a great overall coordinated effort. So that is something that we're putting on our FY21 objectives, and we're even going to put a small program team together to work on this.
Very good.
One other item on that, Amy, is you also have to look at the legal aspect of it all. And so what is it? Is a piece of paper that's going to be able to be enforced in a court? Is it going to be, a digitized signature? Is it going to be, something in the form of a blockchain? So you also have to look at what can legally be enforced in a court of law, what documents they want, and how that's being transmitted back and forth.
So Ed, on that note, what are you seeing in, the portfolio that you serve today across many different industries in terms of blockchain to help answer Tony's question, if you see anything?
Honestly, we're seeing a lot of digitization, but we're not seeing much in terms of blockchain. I'll be honest with you. Most of it is driven, as kind of Daniela said before, they work with a myriad of different firms that are doing work for them, and to get them all on the same page technology-wise is very difficult. And so I think that's impeding a lot of the progress. You could have, you're taking a truckload of goods from LA to the East Coast. It might not be one firm. It might be a couple of smaller firms that are kind of putting it together and making some stops along the way. Everyone along that chain has to be along technology-wise to do that. Getting these smaller firms to update to digital is difficult, and they've been doing it slowly. Finally, the government. You know, they're just getting into electronic BOLs now. For years, it was paper, which is wonderful, except from a legal standpoint, there's still not exactly, you know, flushed out, like, is an electronic BOL signature really the same as having the pure, you know, person's signature on it or the freight forwarder's signature on it? There's some discrepancies within, you know, case law on that. So the answer is no, but it's once the digitization happens faster, you could see it happening, yes.
Okay. And I think the last part of his question, and this goes for all of you, did pandemic accelerate that? Did any of you guys see that? Daniela, I know you kind of spoke about some of the stuff that you did earlier on, but are you, and now you're paperless, which was almost kind of unheard of in your company and perhaps your industry. Do you think pandemic has forced that upon us, as Ed just said?
Maybe not so much the blockchain part of it. Like we said, I think that's far ahead in the future, but definitely trying different ways, you know, to be paperless. And, you know, US Customs again is coming around with their new ACE portal that's more in the paperless direction, but they are working on it step by step. The trucking companies, like Edward also said, is, you know, they are looking into different software sources that they can dig into and make them help being paperless. So we've seen it's been getting better. We have had less papers to deal with, but there's definitely the pandemic helped with that and accelerated with it. That I believe, yes.
Yeah.
I would support that view as well too. Yeah, I mean, with us, you know, we have about 7,000 employees globally working from home, and just the need to function and go paperless has really, I think, pushed this effort forward and accelerated it for us.
Well, I'll say this to Harry Haney, who's the director of supply chain for Loyola. This is a good topic. Maybe we could continue to keep building on with Loyola and its brilliant students for the future with everything that's happening today. Well, thank you for answering those questions. And again, to the audience, please use your Q&A button and type in your questions. We're happy to answer them. You have a very robust panel here that's eager and willing to answer any questions for that matter. And if we don't have the answers, we'll try and find them for you. Let me move on to a question that I think is pretty important, especially in supply chain. When we think about the global economy, because all of you guys have talked about, even if you are a local company, you still have global tentacles in your company, whatever it may be. When we think about those things, how have these shocks shaped our ability to adapt and manage the compliance regulations, and each having different jurisdictions because, you know, everyone has their own laws? I'll start off with Daniela, because I know that's kind of what you do. You're Chief Compliance and Process Officer, and what have these shocks really taught us?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, we did invest actually just recently in a person specializing in the import customs compliance. As we saw, you know, the tariffs have been changing like crazy the last couple of months. And to keep us informed as well as our customers informed, we needed to make this investment, right? So what we are doing locally is we are trying to stay up to date with different newsletters being, you know, directly from US Customs, also from trade attorneys. Trade attorneys normally put out weekly newsletters that you can get a lot of information on, and industry publications. So once we get those newsletters, we definitely dig into them, we see what's new, and then we research it. And then we try to adapt our systems accordingly. And then in turn, we send out newsletters to our customers with any of those changes coming up. So again, we realize, and as Ed said, that, you know, not all our clients have the capital to really invest in compliance. Compliance is not a big portion of, you know, what makes the business going. So this is where we invested a specialist to say we help our customers, we help guide them, and we help prevent that there is any major issues in their supply chain if they're not focusing on it.
Yeah,
we're
seeing clients rely more on the, you know, from the globalization part of it. We're seeing them rely more and more on, say, the freight forwarding companies. They'll have various ones based on region, because sometimes if they go with a really big firm, you know, they might get lost based on volume, et cetera. So that where they're going to in and out of, you know, whether it's Europe or the Far East or whatever, they're using different freight forwarding firms for that, and they're working with them on the compliance to make sure that they have expertise within the freight forwarding firm, as well as the freight forwarding firm making sure that the company is able to handle all that as well too. So we're seeing them outsource, and I don't want to say outsource is probably the wrong word, but they're relying on third-party professionals to help them through that rather than do it themselves.
Very good point. Edward, do you see any of this?
For sure, and for us, it's less about the pandemic driving this. It's more actually what we're seeing is some of the ongoing trade disputes, and you know, what does that mean for us in terms of being able to get access to the material we need to build our product. And one for us is specifically what the U.S. government has done with Huawei in terms of banning the use of their product or banning certain suppliers from supplying components to them, because that has ramifications for us in terms of what does it mean from a customer demand perspective, but also where we have shared component suppliers, what does it mean to their overall stability and, you know, the ability to support our needs long term. So we're continually partnering with our trade and compliance and legal departments to understand the latest developments and announcements and measures that are being taken to feed that back into the supply chain and understand what it means for us.
Yeah, thank you. I think those are, and like you said, Edward, you know, it's not just always it's I know we're all in pandemic mode, so we're all thinking about what, you know, what has happened, what we're doing, and what will happen. But this is really just, you know, the multitude of different shocks that we've had. To your point, you know, we've forgotten because of pandemic, but we did have a geopolitical, you know, concern leading us all the way up into pandemic, and it's still there. So I think these are important things that people who are in the supply chain sector should be continuously thinking about and managing through. Having said that, one thing, and I know you guys have kind of touched on this, but you know, the way that we've been doing business for many decades changed, and possibly permanently, right, because of pandemic. Can you guys give some really quick examples of what you think have permanently changed going forward that are good, positive things for the supply chain industry?
Well, one thing I can touch on for us, and it's not unique to us though, is over, you know, the years, you know, oftentimes outsourced manufacturing has been about chasing the cheapest, you know, cost or lowest cost, and you know, moving to the next low cost region to build your product. I think what we've seen now is, and what we're really considering is balancing more equally the cost reduction efforts along with the supply chain resiliency needs. And so, you know, we're into, you know, looking at our supply chain, you know, footprint overall, and reconsidering far outsourced activities for low cost, and considering nearshoring, reshoring, to make sure that one, we can meet our customers' needs in a time of disruption by having a more local manufacturing operation available, but also two, where there are, you know, government programs and incentives to reshore, you know, if there's an opportunity to take advantage of those. So I think we're rethinking our manufacturing strategy top to bottom and trying to balance those two factors more equally.
Yeah, I would agree with Ed, definitely. I think it's the diversification of the supplier base in terms of who you're working with, where they're at. So I think you'll see a more broad footprint from some of these companies, as opposed to just, you know, bringing everything 100% in from, say, China, for example. I think you'll see a more broad-based group of suppliers geographically that these companies are working with. Second, I think it's also the internal focus, whether it's on systems, policies, speed, you know, efficiencies, things like that. So getting back to my original comment about capital, so that's going to help out a lot. And I think also it forges these types of situations forge a deeper relationship with your key clients and your key prospects, or your key vendors, I should say, because it's the access to the goods and who's fulfilling it. And it's a time to be able to pick off maybe a new client or two that you were trying to get in the door and that competitor stumbled, and you can deliver for them. I'll be the bank. I'll put my banker hat on though and say, I think these things are all cyclical. I think maybe, 5 years from now, there'll be a different shock with a different set of circumstances. But in between that time frame, at some point, the relationship's going to go from, everybody's great and you're very value added to, hey, you got to give me the lowest cost. So I don't want to be pessimistic, but I do think it does kind of go in cycles that way. And when you get to the bottom of the cycle is when everybody's just going after price. And that then's a different strain on your supply chain. You're kind of going back to what you might have been a year or so ago.
So Ed, thank you for that. I actually have a private message that came in, and I'll read the question, and I think it kind of dovetails with what you just said. How long will this newfound appreciation for balancing low cost and resilience last? You kind of answered that, but maybe if you, Edward, or Daniela can talk a little bit more about that, because it's front and center.
So for us, when we engage in a partnership for someone to build product for us, it's not as easy for us to pick up and move because of the complexity of our product. So although I agree with what Ed said around it being cyclical, I just think we are a little less mobile. So when we make our decisions, we're in there for a little bit more of the long haul. So one of the things that we're doing, and this goes back to my opening statement, is when we look to partner with a tier one manufacturing partner, the idea is that you're bringing the scale and the capability, but also to their network. So we have a little bit of the best of both worlds, I'd say, almost, because if we are going to chase cost again, or put a little bit more emphasis on that within their network, there are options to move to lower cost regions, but retain the partnership. And you also have the benefit then of moving within their network. So I'll call it somewhat of the burden of successfully transitioning that manufacturing is more on their shoulders than if you're going from one partner to a new partner. So I agree, there will always be that need to chase cost. I think just for us, we're a little bit more focused on the longer term play.
Yeah, good points, Ed. Thank you for that. Daniela, did you want to add anything on that question?
I mean, from our perspective as freight forwarders, I think it's more, what are companies doing moving forward? Are they going to look into sourcing from different countries, or are they going to really look into having more and more inventory here locally in the US? And I think that in the long run will then determine a lot of the prices and rates and stuff like that. But right now, I think everybody's trying to manage to get through this pandemic and see what they need to do moving forward. So in the long run, it will definitely change, but it will depend on what our company is doing moving forward.
Thank you for that. So I have another question, one that kind of goes back to the theme of what this panel has gotten together today to talk about, preparing for the next shock. And when we talk about supply chain, the sourcing strategy was a critical component of this shock, coupled with the natural psychology of pandemic stocking. I don't need to go into what people were stocking, but I think we all know. What was the most surprising thing that you learned about this behavior in relation to supply chain during this pandemic? And that goes for all of you guys and girls.
I mean, for us, like I said, we've been paperless since 2012, but we really have been keeping our staff in the office all those years just to really promote the teamwork and the interaction, which is an important factor in anybody's life, right? So for us now to really work 100% from home, that was really a new step for us and a new scenario for us. So we really needed to ensure our people were able to work from home and they had the equipment from home to work from home, and that we, if not, allow them to bring their equipment home and also see how can we communicate with them. We still need to manage our teams and interact with our teams. So making sure, they are set on a certain video conferencing system where we can be in touch on a regular basis, and where also our clients can get in touch with our staff to, make sure our service stays uninterrupted. And like I mentioned before, that it's really shown us that our employees are geographically neutral, really. They can work from anywhere now and help anybody out, no matter if they're located in Chicago or Los Angeles or in New York, it doesn't really matter. So that's definitely been what's changed for us, I would say.
Thank you. Edward, Ed?
Yeah, for us, I would say the rush to stockpile inventory wasn't necessarily a shock. I mean, so, we were referring to it as the toilet paper effect for sure. But because of the type of customers that we support, with so many stories you're hearing even today about people moving to a complete work from home sort of environment, there was a need to expand bandwidth. So our customers were looking to, build out their networks to support that increased demand. So we weren't, I'll say, overall shocked by that. I guess maybe individually customer to customer, there was maybe some variances that were a little bit unique and maybe surprising to us. The other thing I think for us too is that we've seen, and it was even something that was shared in our last financial results. So I'm not sharing anything that's the top secret or confidential, but we've seen that purchasing, that rush to maintain inventory, slow down, which I think is a little surprising also too, because of the fact that COVID obviously is still out there and people are still working from home. So when do we see a return to, we'll call it normal? And then the other thing for us too, I think that we struggled with around this whole thing was just because the government response to the COVID situation varied so much by country to country, city to city, state to state, whatever, just trying to manage and understand that both from a demand perspective in terms of what our customers are going to need and when, but also to then our ability to continue to supply based on sort of a rolling shutdown effect across the globe. So those were the things. I think it was the random nature of the pandemic and just seeing how both our customers and our suppliers reacted to that.
Yeah, those are all really good points. Ed?
Yeah, I would just, from a macro standpoint, because we're dealing with companies in a lot of different industries and geographies, we were very, I shouldn't say surprised, but there were several industries that traditionally are, kind of pennies per dollar type places, and I'll say specifically grocery stores. And they have done fantastic during this time frame because of, people focusing and, eating more at home and less eating out. So what it did was it shifted, the suppliers to them. It had to shift from producing their goods for restaurants and wholesale to smaller packages to whatever it is to supply in the grocery. Otherwise, they're losing some of those sales. So I think the ability that these companies did to change their ways of doing business on the fly to go where their demand shifted to was very impressive to watch. And then the profitability of those grocery stores obviously went up higher because of the volume that went through there. Conversely, we have thought that the leisure and restaurant would come back a little faster, which it has not and doesn't look like it's going to. So that was a bit of a surprise for us. Not that we have much exposure to it, but again, it's on a more of a macro basis. And finally, on the auto side and on the industrial side, we thought that would stay lower longer, and that's actually done better for it kind of came back quicker. The auto side did. So on a macro basis, yes, we've been pretty impressed how some things have turned around faster and some things have taken longer to come back.
Yeah, I think, the pandemic for all of us, because we haven't seen a pandemic, it was 100 years ago, but, this was definitely an eye-opener. And I always thought that this session and the title of this session, Preparing for the Next Shock, was so, it was well-timed, but it's inevitable. It continues to keep happening in different capacities and different facets of the economy. And how do you prepare for that? I think all of you guys have given some really good, really good nuggets from not just purely just supply chain, but the technology behind it, the compliance behind it, the capital behind it. With that said, I would just like to open it up to all of you. What are the one or two pieces of advice for, the Loyola Quinlan audience today that you would leave them with in terms of how to prepare for that next shock? Anybody who wants to start first and give some good pointers so people can take these notes down, that would be fantastic.
I mean, for us, I think it was, or for me personally, actually, to always think forward and be proactive. And look at how can we use any advances in technology in our favor, and how can we make positive impact with that in our daily business. I think that being proactive and always being open to changes, not just when something like a pandemic happens, but ahead of time, that's really a very important step. And again, it has shown in our industry or in our company that, you know, being paperless since 2012, we really had no impact working remotely and sending our people home, and customer service, we felt no impact at all on that. And that just showed how important that proactiveness is. And one of the other things I would say is definitely to learn to trust in our people. Like I said earlier, yes, we had our people being able to work remotely, but we still had them in the office. And now to, you know, it's a different world. They're working from home, they're having kids at home, to trust them, to make sure they still get their job done, even in this new environment. That's been definitely something that we needed to learn, and we continue to learn. And we need to continue to learn how to motivate and engage our teams remotely now, because this is not going to go away anytime soon. So how can we keep them engaged and make sure they continue to stay positive? So that's definitely one thing that we will look into, and continue to think about new products and services, not just for our staff, but also for our clients. Where can we, especially as a freight forwarding company, help our clients with sourcing, with inventory, any compliance related matters? Where can we help? So this is definitely what we will take from there.
I would strongly support Danielle's comments, especially around the proactive, the planning. And I would say, you know, again, test your resiliency planning, make sure that you are continually monitoring, adopting new technologies where available, adapting to changing business climates, and that lastly, the people aspect as well too. I have a team of about 85 people spread across the globe, and what I've been most proud of in terms of how Ciena has handled the situation is the focus we've put on the individuals and making sure that people are successful and comfortable in the work from home environment, and giving them the tools and the support that they need. And that's so critical, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are driving the success that we're seeing. So the people aspect cannot be ignored at all.
Yeah, I
Thank you for that,
think
Alex.
Daniela's comments and Ned's comments are spot on in terms of, you know, people and flexibility and adapting to change and things like that. So I'm not going to repeat what they said. Their comments are exact, and it's what we've experienced at the bank and what we've seen our clients go through as well too. The one thing I would add to that, you know, throwing from the banking side of it, is just, you know, continuing to have not only the operational flexibility and willingness to change, but then it's also the capital available to you to do so. And just, you know, always make sure that you're not, you know, borrowing off your last dollar and things like that. You've got to have sources of capital available to you at various points in time within your, you know, kind of your business life and your business cycle. You just have to know what those options are. You don't have to do them, you just have to know what they are and when it's available to you and how you can access them. But no, I agree. I think Danielle and Ed's comments were fantastic.
Yeah, so if I were to summarize everything that you guys said, Daniela, trust in your people. It could not be, you know, any more important than just running your businesses. So thank you for that. Edward, you know, testing your resilience, ability to be able to prepare for these shocks. And again, you had a resounding, the people aspect is crucial and first and foremost. So thank you for that as well. Ed, capital to do so. And you also agreed in the people and the adaptability aspect, and knowing what your options are. You don't need to have them all laid out, but just knowing what your options are. And I think that goes with everything that we've talked about today, whether it's compliance, whether, you know, it's data, it's technology, whether it's capital, just knowing what your options are and having the resources to be able to tap into. I want to say thank you to all of the panelists today. You guys really provided some very, very good points. And I think, again, preparing for the next shock doesn't necessarily have to be another pandemic. It can just be anything. I was having this conversation with Ed Klinger a couple weeks ago, and I said, not all economic downturns are created equal. They're just not, you know. But I ironically keep having them as the economic system would have them, but how do we channel those resources? So I will just say thank you to everyone. Thank you, Loyola, for putting this session together for us to have the opportunity to speak to the audience, and hand it over to Harry Haney.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you to our terrific panel. You guys did a great job, and I hope everyone was taking notes out there, because there was an awful lot of those golden nuggets that John referred to at the top of the program. You know, as I listen to all this, I think too that supply chain has really come to a point of prominence and visibility that we've just never been at before. And this is our opportunity to really shine, to take our organizations to the next level, not just in performance, but in helping the board and all the leadership from top to bottom understand the importance of supply chain and what it means. And, you know, with that, hopefully that will be one of the things that helps us maintain over time this balance of resilience and low cost. So anyway, thank you all very much again for your participation this morning. It's been terrific.